Good evening. Today I'd like to talk about liberalism, progressivism, sex, and their standards. Today there's a big discussion about homosexual marriage, and the effort is to have the state not only permit homosexual marriage and recognize it as a marriage, but also that the state will, through the public school system, promote that homosexual marriage is normal and average and etc., regardless to any other person's beliefs about it. Why do I say this position is a liberal position? Because it is all founded in the idea of the state creating social justice, and the social justice in this case is for homosexuals. Now, when it comes to liberalism and sex, I've tried to figure out what their standards are. And the only thing I can figure out, in all my discussions with them, is that the only real standard they have, the only line in the sand they have, is consent. As long as it's consensual, it's okay. Now, this would apply to, if you really push them and say, look, why can't polygamists get married? If their answer would be, sure they could, as long as they're consenting. You just have to push them a little bit and they'll end up in that camp. You'll say a 14-year-old having sex, why can't they have sex? Well, as long as it's consenting, it's okay. They promote sex education for kids as young as 10 years of age, in some cases down to kindergarten. Then again, it's not about age. They don't see age as a line. Again, they see consent as a line. Consent is an arbitrary concept of that if you want to do it, you can do it. And society should not reject you for doing it. For example, if someone was an advocate for homosexual marriage and you came to them and say, well, what if a brother and a sister truly fell in love and wanted to have a family together? What's wrong with that? They're both consenting adults. And they go, well, as long as they're consenting, it should be recognized by the state. Now, let's look at the age barrier. Now, we conservatives put an age barrier. It's an arbitrary barrier at like 18 or 16, depending on the state. It's arbitrary. It's a barrier. But let's examine that closely. What the sex education people, prominent promoters of sex education, say is the reason why they must teach kids how to properly have sex? The answer is because they're going to do it anyways. Well, if they're going to do it anyways, clearly they're consenting. And if they're going to do it anyways and you're teaching them how to do something, if they cannot legally consent, then you are in fact actually teaching them how to commit a crime. So, do we teach people how to steal? Do we teach people how to rape? Legally speaking, sex education, when it teaches someone who's under the age of consent, is basically teaching them how to rape somebody because they cannot consent, period. Because there's an age gap saying they can't. Well, the next argument then goes, well, if that's the case, then you have to get rid of that age barrier. You have to lower it down to the point of the sex education. How young has that been? Down to the age of 10 in some places. So by their standard, you can have a 10-year-old consenting to sex. And then you go, well, are you for a 30-year-old having sex with a 10-year-old? Their response initially would be, no, we're against that. But if you point out, hey, you were saying a 10-year-old can consent to have sex. Why should there be an age issue? Can't a 30-year-old marry a 50-year-old? Or have sex with a 50-year-old? Of course. That would be age discrimination if you wouldn't let that happen. Then why not do 10 to 30? See, the problem is they don't have any solid lines. And this is founded largely in that they look for their own answers through their own wisdom and their own intellect and etc. And they rationalize. And in rationalization, they can rationalize pretty much anything to make it acceptable as a behavior. Right now, the current fad for them is homosexuality. Once they get that, and trust me, they'll keep pushing until they get it, they'll promote polygamy, and then incest, and then anything else. This is not a slippery slope. It's already happening in Europe. So, anyways, to recap the main points here, the only standard that the liberal community has when it comes to sex is that it's consensual. And if we follow down the progressive liberal path, we will end up in a very hedonistic society in which there are no ages of consent, there is no moral standard outside of the rough concept of consensual. Anything outside that, and even that they'll blur. Thank you very much. Have yourself a good day, and God bless.